Hey guys, it's Mr. V over here, doing a book review today for One of a Kind, The Rise and Fall of Stuey the Kid Unger, the World's Greatest Poker Player, by Nolan Dalla and Peter Alson. So, this book is a nonfiction book about Stu Unger, who some consider the greatest poker player, or one of the greatest poker players who ever existed, and he played poker in the 1980s and 1990s. Now, initially, this book was meant to be an autobiography. So the authors, they interviewed Stu Unger in the 1990s, but they also interviewed many of the people that are mentioned like in the story that played with Stu Unger, did other things with Unger. So you really get a first-hand account of a lot of the stories they talk about. Now, before reading this book, or before considering this book, I would say that it helps to know the poker and gambling world just a bit. You want to know the different games. You want to know Nolan and Hold'em, or you want to know blackjack, or craps. Some of those things. It's not completely necessary. You don't need to do it because most of the book takes place outside of the poker room. It shows his life outside of the poker room. And even if you don't know the games, he does say the rules while he's writing it. He tells you the main general rules of the game. But I would still say it's easier if you know the games. But again, you don't need to know because a lot of the book does take place outside of the tables because you get to see his life outside of his tables because it shows the rise, but he also shows the fall of Stu Unger. And this book actually, it covers Stu Unger's whole life. It doesn't, the book goes all the way back. It goes all the way back to when he was a kid. And it discusses like what his life was like growing up. It's not a huge section of that, but he still shows what his life was like growing up because that played like a humongous part into how he got to where he was. And that's just a brief summary of that part. But like he shows like how he grew up in New York in the 1970s and how like there was an underground gambling world back then in the 1970s in New York. How there was card rooms, like there was sports betting, and Stu Unger actually began betting illegally at the age of 14. Um, and he even dropped out of high school. Those are things I didn't even know that he dropped out of high school because he was just illegally gambling and he was doing well. Again, at the age of 14, but that contributed to like his tremendous gambling problem, which he discusses a lot more in the book, because at a young age he won a lot of money. He was an amazing gin rummy player. Some people say he's the greatest ever. I even Googled it, and it wasn't just the book exaggerating. Yeah, when you Google it, he is considered the greatest ever. And he just won so much money at that game from a very early age. But then it also shows how he lost it all betting. And, he became a great poker player, but he lost it all betting. He did casino games, sports betting, betting on the horses. Like he just had a tremendous gambling problem. He discusses all these stories in here and just shows his life, how he went from the age of 14 and then how later in life he moved to Vegas and he did well. He learned how to play poker and he became such an amazing poker player, but how he just could not overcome that gambling problem. And he shares so many stories because like he lost his dad's inheritance within just a few hours, or he had some of these big tournament winnings, both in gin but mainly in poker. He had these big tournament winnings, and they were all gone within just days. And you have to remember these are like 1980s. This is like hundreds of thousands of dollars and even millions of dollars are just gone like so quickly. And the book just shares so many interesting stories. Just a brief example is like how he won the World Series of Poker in like I think it was 1980. This was the first time he won. He actually won 3 times, but he won it in 1980, and he actually didn't even know how to play Nolan and Hold'em that much. And it's crazy to think how he won this whole tournament without like really knowing much about the game. And it just shows then that he had this natural talent, which is why the book says he's the greatest poker player. But even today, people still consider him one of the greatest poker players because he just had such natural talent. And that's why he won it 3 times. And it's just crazy to think he did that. Or like it's another example of some interesting stories that shows in the book is it shows like he wins like $500,000. And when you win it at the tournaments, that you just have 500,000 in cash. And then what happened with it? Because he just had tons of cash and just what happens with it? What does he do with it? And he just shows what happens and some of the things he does from sports betting to just wanting to live the high life of buying everything at like a bar, just buying like the most expensive things, paying everybody, tipping people hundreds of dollars, buying crazy cars, and just just blowing it. And you see it. And also he turned to drugs, which he also goes over in the book. And this book it shows Stu Unger, but it really shows like the poker world, because of course Stu Unger is the main person in the book, but there's many stories of other famous poker players. For example, like Doyle Brunson, Chip Reese, Jack Strauss. There's a few other famous poker players from the 1980s and 1990s, and they're part of the story because they were part of the poker world. They knew Stu Unger. He had a lot of friends in the poker world, and they just show like the games that they gamble on and how they will just gamble on everything, and there are side bets on everything. Like I used to watch poker on TV, and I didn't realize how many side bets were going on. And it really shows it in the book just how many side bets there are, and it's really crazy to see what they will bet on and the amount they bet. It is really crazy when you see it, and when you read it, you can see why most poker players are broke, why most poker professionals are broke. Yes, they make a living on it, but they're broke, and then they need to count on somebody else they have to count on someone else backing them, and they have to borrow money, and then they win a lot of money again, and then they lose it again, and it's a sad but very eye-opening story. And throughout the book that Stu Unger is going to lose all of his money, because the beginning of the book, the opening, talks about like the end of his life and how he was broke. That's within the first few pages. He was broke. So it's interesting knowing he will lose it all, but it's also pretty sad, because you see that he wins, like in the 1980s, he wins like a tournament for $400,000 or $500,000, and you just know that he's going to go broke. Or in the 90s, he wins $1 million, and you know that he is broke within just a couple of years. So it is very interesting, but it's also pretty sad. But the authors, they just have like a really great writing style. They have a great writing style, and it's a very easy read. It's just you can fly through the book. It is just so entertaining, and it's very easy to read if you can handle the topics. Of course, the gambling, but also drug use. So that's why it's a very, very interesting read. It's very entertaining. It's also incredibly sad, because you know that he will lose it all, and you know that he's going to fall into the drug world. It was bad for Stu Unger, but it's definitely a fun read if you can handle the topics. But overall, I would say that this book was just a very fascinating yet cautionary life story, as the Chicago Tribune says. It is fascinating and it is cautionary for the life story, because it is the rise of Stu Unger, which is an amazing story, but it is also the fall of Stu Unger, which is a very sad story, because you realize this is a real person and you get to see what it is. So I highly recommend this book. It was such a great read, and if you like poker at all, if you've been to the poker games, you should definitely read it then. But for everyone, even if you're not into it, I think it's a very entertaining read, and I highly recommend it. But if you guys have any comments, questions, anything like that, please post it in the comment section below, because I love to hear your comments, your opinions. If you guys enjoyed the book review today, hit the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V over here. Go enjoy reading.